Hello.
Yep, I can hear you.
But you can't hear Jess?
Why?
No. Oh, no, now I can. Yeah.
Did you think it was Chris? No, I'm just kidding.
No, no, I don't know. You were frozen for a second, but
Oh,
whatever.
apparently
Every
my computer keeps freezing on me.
Okay, well, it looks okay now, so
Not
whatever.
on my end, but apparently.
Yeah.
I've been forced into my kitchen for the last 2 weeks, so
That's exciting.
not really.
Yeah.
I miss my bedroom space, but we haven't been able to sleep in our bedroom for 2 weeks because we had a hornet's nest in it
Woof.
and they still haven't fixed it.
Ugh. Yeah, I
Freaking
hate that.
landlords suck.
If it helps, I'm not in my room either. I'm in a random hotel in Pennsylvania.
It does look, I was gonna say, I'm like, you look like you're in a hotel room.
Yeah.
It's got the
The
hotel curtains going on.
Oh yeah, yeah. I tried to they have like these weird polka dot ones that were right here and I tried to push them away so that it wouldn't be as they're like sort of like cheetah print but not cool.
Not
I don't
cool
know.
cheetah print.
No,
I mean,
whatever.
yeah. The 80s were cheetah print era, weren't they?
True. I feel like it's starting to come back, but
I don't know.
hotels haven't exactly
I've
caught up.
always worn a few cheetah print, but that's because I used to do like pinup stuff. So
Oh, sure.
that
I
was
can promise
popular.
you I never wore cheetah print.
Well, if by chance you would like to do cheetah print, shameless plug, I do have a cheetah print of my own brand shirt out there right now, so
There you go, Chris. If you want a cheetah print shirt, want to
perfect.
live dangerously. Chris does like other shirt colors than black though.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
usually most of mine are black, but every once in a while I decide to stray a little bit off, so
I have a lot of black as well, but
yeah,
regular that's usually band t-shirts though. Band t-shirts are always usually black.
yeah.
Very
And
rarely are they not.
yeah, and tech people, that's kind of become the uniform, to kind of
Blend
blend
in.
in and not be seen. Plus, I
I can
mean,
see. I can
black
see
doesn't
that.
show sweat nearly as well.
That's true. That's true. You wouldn't want to like be up there with a white shirt on. You'd be not blending in and they would see your dirty armpits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some of us are really good sweaters too, so this is a perfect introduction.
Isn't it?
well,
Hey, it's real life. It's real life. We like to
Yeah.
talk real life all the time.
Yeah.
for I guess a real intro, if you could tell listeners who you are and what got you into sound engineering.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Dewar. I'm a front of house and monitor engineer. I've worked with a bunch of bands, some of which you may or may not know. And actually, I got started in this industry kind of the same way a lot of us do. I'm a failed musician. I started playing instruments when I was in fourth grade. My mom was a music teacher, so she always had all kinds of music on in the house and stuff like that, and started playing in schools and school bands and all that stuff, and played all the way through some of college. Started playing in pop punk bands and stuff, basically like covering Blink 182 as most people my age kind of did, and then that morphed into some heavier music and some different stuff. And that band would play a lot at this specific venue. Well, to backtrack a little bit, we needed somebody to figure out how to record our demos and save those songs and stuff like that. So I kind of started learning how to record, and then we played at this venue a lot. And they were like, "Hey, our sound engineer just canceled. Do you think you'd be able to show up and like figure this out?" And I was like, "Yeah, I could probably figure it out." I mean, it was like maybe 150 cap room, just an analog, like 16 channel analog mixer and two main PA speakers, no monitors. It was very small and very basic. I was like, I think I could figure this out. Um, and I did, and I mixed a couple shows there, and it was a lot of fun. And then when I moved to LA, I got in with a production company, and they would do like they had a studio in the building where you like an actual studio, and then they had 5 or 6 different rehearsal rooms where touring bands could come in and like rehearse for tours. And so sometimes we would go in and kind of help them prep for those. Sometimes we would actually mix those, and then we also did festivals and concerts and stuff like that outside of that. And so I kind of just started. I went there to be in the studio, and turns out that I was really good at the live stuff. I could wrap my head around it. I could stay calm under pressure and all of those things that you kind of need for a live, atmosphere. And to be honest, I made a lot more money doing the live stuff than studio stuff, and so I just kind of drifted right into that. And for better or worse, I haven't stopped, and so I've been doing this professionally almost 10 years now, full time. So it's definitely been an adventure for sure, but it's been
Yeah,
cool.
I'd say so. You get to travel the world.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, again, there are a very select few jobs that are better than this one. I'd still rather be on stage, paying somebody else to make me sound good rather than somebody paying me to make them sound good. But it's really a cool place to be. I mean, I get to work with amazing artists all the time, and yeah, I get paid to travel the world. In like 2 weeks here, I fly out to Europe, and I'll be there for 6 weeks. And again, I mean, how many people get that privilege? I'm
Yeah,
I'm super lucky. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah,
here I am.
Now,
I've only ever been to Canada.
there's still time. There is still time.
now
And
what?
actually, to be honest, I was going to say I hadn't been to Europe until for real until I think 2 years ago, and now I've gone 5 times. This might be my 5 or 6 time in Europe. So I don't know. There's time. That's all I'm saying.
Suggest there's still time for you to see the world.
Yep,
Oh yeah.
still time.
I would imagine that even in those 10 years, technology has changed a little bit with it. How much does emerging technology play into your creative process, or even how do you stay updated with the advancements of that technology?
Yeah. I mean, so the basics of the technology has always been, kind of the same. From an engineering perspective, an EQ is an EQ. It's basically going to do roughly the same thing. A compressor is a compressor. It's going to do roughly the same thing. But the way that those are implemented, the different versions of those, the all that kind of stuff, that has definitely grown, exponentially fast, even since I started, and not even thinking about before that. And so it's been you definitely have to be a very specific type of person to stay on top of it, because it's really easy because it moves so fast. It's really easy to just kind of get complacent and just be like, yeah, well, I know enough, so it'll be fine. And that'll work for a little while, but eventually, like, you're going to get surpassed by technology, and then you're going to have trouble keeping up. Luckily, I'm still like I'm still pretty into like all of that stuff. I enjoy kind of finding. You know what? I just realized too. I didn't even start my recording, so hopefully yours is good enough. That's really
That's good. We're recording. We're good.
that's really kind of sad, but yeah, I got up my whole setup here, and I wasn't even using it. Wow,
It's
that's
okay. Chris and I
anyway.
don't know that Chris and I have ever actually had anyone record us.
Well, anyway, I'll at least pretend to look cool while holding a microphone. um, but anyway, sorry about that. Yeah, so technology. I mean, it's definitely like you have to be a very specific type of person that's at least a little bit interested in that kind of stuff and trying to stay on top of it. I'm still super like into it. I enjoy like finding this new stuff and being like, oh, how does that work, or how can I implement this differently, or um, even just up to a couple weeks ago, there's a guy who was showing off like his setup and how he does things and routes things and processes them. And he did some things that I've never seen anyone do before. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. Now I have to figure out how to do that. And so it's definitely, I haven't really answered your question, but uh, yeah, I mean, it definitely has changed a lot. And you have to kind of stay on top of it in order to keep up with everything. But I'm at least still having fun with it. So I think that's the biggest thing. And I enjoy learning, which again, not everybody does. So I think that also plays a huge role as well.
Yeah. I enjoy learning. It just depends on what I'm learning.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's also totally fair. I get very I read a good bit of books, but I put down boring ones very quickly, because if it doesn't, my ADHD, if it doesn't hold me enough, I'm just like, nope, I'm on to the next thing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
So
but it's
talking about technologies, what is your current favorite front of house console?
right now I would say Digico is my favorite brand. Um, they have a bunch of different options. They all kind of do basically the same thing, but their new quantum series is, you know, leaps and bounds above everything that they've put out so far, and I'm really enjoying those. Avid, the company that also makes Pro Tools, has a console out called the S6L, and I use that one a lot too. That's probably my second favorite. But you know, again, there's tons of console manufacturers and stuff that are constantly putting out, you know, new stuff and doing things in just a little bit of a different way, and it's a lot of fun to like keep watching them and seeing what they do. And it's for a long time it was just like three companies that were all kind of doing their own thing, and now a bunch of people are doing really cool things, and so they're pushing each other to be better. And like, oh well, that's a really cool feature, we're going to add that to this, or we're going to cut out, we see a lot of people are using this external thing, we're going to cut out the need for that and we're going to make our own. And I'm super excited to see like how things grow and where some of these manufacturers and how some of this technology is integrated, and how it moves forward, because there's so much cool stuff out there that they're all kind of, you know, still competing for number one, and they're doing a really good job of it.
Yeah.
Would you say an engineer's favorite console would be based off of kind of how they tackle the task at hand?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the biggest part of it. Again, I think it comes down to kind of like, what's your favorite DAW? You know, your favorite recording software. Because at the end of the day, they all kind of do the same thing, but it's how does that console best, you know, work with your workflow? How can you be the fastest with it? How does it give you the tools that you need, or do you need 6 other things to accomplish that one thing that you're trying to do? And I think that's pretty much the biggest reason that people choose what they choose. For me, the reason that I like Digico so much is that it's almost 100% customizable, and so I can set up that console in any way that I want to, and to get the result that I want. And so that gives me multitudes of options, rather than like, you know, not to badmouth an X32, because they're amazing consoles for what they are, what they can do, the price point, it can't be beat. But when you turn that on, everything is like, channel 1 is always here, channel 2 is always here, these are always here, effects are always here. And that's really good for people who are just starting to learn. But it doesn't give the amount of flexibility that some of the other ones do. And Digico, that's the biggest reason why I like those, is because I can actually run that like a recording session, versus something else that's already kind of pre-programmed and set up the way that they think it should be run, or the way that like a would be the most helpful to a beginner or somebody like that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Not talking consoles, but I have discussed with Chris, I'm like, man, we should go into those little soundboards. So when you have something funny go on, you could be like, ha ha ha, laugh track or
Yep.
something in the podcast. But I'm like, I don't know the first thing about choosing one of those and which one would be easy for me to use.
Yeah, it also depends on what software you're using to record, and what you're going in and out of these recording sessions with. Because some of them, it's literally just like a USB push pad, and you can set up, you know, this button is the laugh track and this button is this, and it all just integrates perfectly. And some of them take a lot of time to really set up and pick and choose, and so they can all be, not all, but most of them can be used. It just kind of depends on you know, how much time you're willing to put in, and you know how you're running everything on the back end as well.
Yeah, maybe I'll look into it more.
Yeah. I worked for this podcast for a little while, and it was a lot of fun as well. But I was also trying to do the same thing and figure out the best way to integrate all of that, you know, with those MIDI pads, and trigger like, you know, weird sound clips or applause or whatever else. And it's fun, but it takes a lot of time to really set up and do it the way that you.
Yeah, I feel like I would
want it.
get it set up and then I'd forget to use it. I'd be like, oh, missed opportunity.
It's funny. I also did exactly that too. Or one day because we record all together in the same room, which is really nice. But then when we all forgot our headphones, you couldn't hear what the sound effects were anyway. So it was like, it didn't matter because the effect was gone, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I you know, I think it's fun because it gives, there's always something new to learn, and there's always something new to do and try. And it keeps it super fresh and interesting.
Right. For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
So what would you say the most underrated aspect of sound engineering is that the average listener would never notice?
I mean, I think, to be honest, I think the best engineers are the ones that you don't even know they're there, because they're just doing such a good job, and you're so focused on the artist that you forget that anything else is happening. The worst situation is when something goes wrong and everybody stops and turns and looks at the one guy in the crowd and goes, hey, and so that's probably, that's, I guess, kind of more where I would lean. I don't know if that's necessarily underrated, but kind of, yeah. Or being able to stay cool in those situations when things do break.
Right.
Because again, some of these shows, you're standing in front of 10 or 20,000 people, and if anything goes wrong, everybody stops and looks at the one person in the crowd, and that can be very, very nerve-wracking too.
What was the first big tour you went on?
Okay, so I went on a bunch of smaller tours that were, more when I was playing. And those I don't fully count. I went on a couple smaller tours that, again, were like 100 or so capacity rooms. And again, like, I was so green and so new, and it was just like, basically paying for food every night. But the first like big tour that I went on was this band called Rooney.
I
And
remember Rooney.
yeah. And I learned so much from them. That was the first bus tour I was ever on. I was actually guitar tech for them, and it was a really, really good learning experience. I mean, I was still super green. Definitely made a lot more mistakes than any of us would like to admit, but it was great, and it gave me a lot of insights to really really rocket forward into kind of where I am now, and know the difference between like what a tech is really supposed to do and expected to do, and what touring really is. Because the rest, not that I fully thought this way, but a lot of just concert attendees think, oh well, you show up and you work for an hour and it's all just like drinking and partying and rock and roll outside of that. And it's definitely not that. It's a lot of work and a lot of behind the scenes stuff that most people don't
Yeah, I
fully see.
mean,
So
it would be kind of hard to do sound for a show if you were hungover all the time.
oh yeah. And I can tell you for sure, I'm not going to name any names, but a lot of the industry definitely did that, and there's quite a few that still do.
I mean, I
Because
guess if it's working for them.
yeah, I mean that's not really my vibe. I was never really into that, because it's hard. But yeah, whatever you want to do. It is definitely an interesting job place for that, because drinking on the job is far more normalized than literally every other job on the planet.
It's true. It's true.
Now, speaking of tours, you work with All American Rejects and PVRIS. Just kind of curious how many input channels they both have.
So for All American Rejects, I think we're up to about 54, right around there. With PVRIS, it was probably just under that, somewhere between 40 and 48. And that's live instruments and some talkback channels and things like that most of the audience doesn't really see, but that are still important to that. So
Yeah.
I think the highest level channel count that I ever did was this artist Hunter Hayes, and I was at 90 inputs.
Hmm. So how high can you get it on your?
It depends on the console. So things like an X32, obviously it's in the name. They can only do 32 channels or 32 input channels. And then depending on console size and other stuff like that. I mean, some of the Digico one, I mean, well, all the Avid ones, they tap out at 192. And Digico, they're tiered, but most of them are 72 or 90, and then some of them go up even higher into like the 200 and 300s if you get the right the specific console, the specific stage racks and all that stuff. So you can get really, really, really high channel counts if you're trying. Most bands nowadays that are in like that kind of world, I'm seeing more. It's somewhere between like 40 and 60 or so, depending on how many crew and talkbacks and actual like instruments are on stage and stuff like that. But that's probably a pretty normal number for like general size artists.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about sound stuff, so it's like I'm like, how many channels does a thing have?
Well, and that's kind of what could be fun about it, because like you know, on some artists, you have like a bass guitar and that's one input. Or you have a bass guitar and then you get the dry DI signal, plus you get multiple microphones on a cabinet, plus you can sometimes get like an affected loop out, or you can get multiple cabinets. So then you can have like 8 different inputs for one single bass guitar player. Same with drums. I mean, you can add multiple mics on each drum. You can have multiple, you know, mics on cymbals. You can have mics that are above and behind drummers.
Mm-hmm.
You can add extra triggers. I think the highest drummer count I ever saw was like 28 or something like that, just for drums.
Dang.
Yeah, so it's really artist dependent. I mean, it kind of changed, and genre too. Genre has a lot to do with it. Indie bands and stuff like that are much more minimalist, or some of the like the bigger like rock bands and stuff like that. Well, they'll have like, oh, I guarantee I haven't seen Neil Peart's, but I can assume that, like, you know, he's got 30 something drums around him at all times plus electronics. I mean, his input count is probably 50 or something just by himself. So
That's funny.
yeah. And sometimes it is limited to, you know, smaller artists have a smaller budget, so you can only get, you know, you only have access to like 48 channels, and so you kind of have to cut that down and fit, you know, within those parameters as well. And if you have an unlimited budget, then you can kind of go crazy in the other direction and get a whole bunch of stuff that you may or may not actually need. So it all kind of depends on a lot of stuff, which is a terrible answer, but it's the real one.
It's the real answer. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, how do you approach creating a sound environment that enhances what's going on versus overpowering it?
That's a really good question. It again, like that's a hard question to answer simply, because it depends on a lot of things too, right? So usually what I'll do is I'll take, like, if I get signed on with a new artist, I'll take some time and I'll listen to what their records actually sound like. Sometimes I'll talk to an MD, a music director, somebody who's kind of like in charge of the creative side of the show, and be like, okay, like what's the vibe here that you're going for? And then I'll sit down and kind of figure out like how to, you know, how to take the way that I mix and the sound that I go for personally, and like either make it kind of match what the record already sounds like, make it match like what the artist and all of those, the creative side, what they're kind of going for, and then really it's working with them. You know, when I was with PVRIS, they have a very specific sound that they go for in the studio, and it's a lot more like, drums are a lot more electronic and things are a lot more like electronic based. But for the show part of it, all those drums are real, and so that adds a whole different level of, you know, sonically, like how the show is actually going to sound, right? Because the drums are real and they're actually in the room and all of that kind of stuff. And so the approach there is a little bit different, because obviously the input source is a little bit different. And then sometimes it depends on the artist and the time you have. Some of them I've sat down with them and been like, you know, what do you want? Okay. And then we'll go through a couple rehearsals and then I'll play back like what I have, and they'll be like, oh, okay, I like what you did with this, but this piece is, you know, should be more predominant, or this part should be a little bit more laid back, or, you know, for somebody like me, I started in metal. Like that's what I was, yeah, well, granted I started in pop punk, but like it morphed pretty quickly to like metal and like metalcore, hardcore stuff. And so for me, drums are something that usually I have a lot of like attack, a lot more high end, a lot more click and punch to the show, whereas some other people don't have that as much. And sometimes that really works and complements, and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes, you know, I get yelled at and kind of have to pull back. But again, it's hard. It's a real, like, communication is really key with everybody, with the artist, the MD, and everybody. I worked with this other artist that's very, very like guitar heavy, and they basically wanted me to get a good CD mix and then take the guitars and turn them up over top of everything. So that they were just, the guitars were just always like sitting on top of everything, which isn't the approach that I would have taken at first. But that's kind of what they wanted to go for. And so we worked together and we kind of adjust, you know, how that kind of sounded and balanced out and all of that.
Right.
So communication is huge with that one. And it's important, especially if you have the time to really sit in and dial that in.
It's funny that you talked about the drums for PVRIS, where they had studio drums that weren't real, but then you had to bring it to a live show. Because we actually talked to a band more recently about that, and they were like, oh, I went into the studio and I realized they didn't have real drums, and I was just like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's how a lot of artists do it nowadays. They don't have real
Yep.
drums in the studio. So I mean, I guess that would
Yep.
definitely be harder to match live for sure.
Yeah. And sometimes, sometimes in studios it's a budget thing. So recording live drums is a lot more expensive. You have to have the appropriate room, you have to have the appropriate mics, inputs, time. You have to have a good engineer that can actually cut that up and make it sound the way that you want to sound. Whereas I could sit on my laptop here and, push a bunch of keys and make the drums sound, program them to sound the way that I want them to sound. So it's, from a budgetary standpoint, sometimes that's just the way to go. With PVRIS, it was more of a vibe, more of a, like, they liked that sound of like that, the electronic, kind of vibe.
Hmm.
But then, again, live, it's a completely different, uh, different thing. Um, Same with, I worked for this artist Ty Verdes, and he is kind of the same way. Most of his stuff is very electronic based, but then when we go into a show, he has real guitar, real bass, real drums, and it just changed. Sometimes we had horn players, saxophone and trumpet and stuff, and so that changes the whole like vibe of the song, and way that like the show actually hits. Like some of those songs are just huge, things at a show, whereas on the record it's a lot more like subdued and leaning back. So it definitely keeps it fun, but that's also why live shows are cool, right? Because people don't generally, they want to hear the songs, they want to hear the band, but they don't necessarily want to hear the record, because you can listen to the record at home. You want something that's a little bit different, a little bit more upbeat and fun and lively, and I think that's what's really cool with like with artists today that are actually like being artists and doing the artistic side of it, is you can take things that you once did and then just grow them into something even bigger, and that's a really cool thing to be a part of for sure.
Yeah. So what have been some of your hardest venues you've had to do front of house and mixing at?
um Honestly, the harder venues are generally the smaller ones, because, yeah, again, for me, like, I take a very studio-esque approach to a lot of live mixing. So there's things you can do in a studio in a very controlled environment that you can't do the same thing live. So for instance, on a lead vocal, you might boost a lot of the high end and to get like a specific type of sound. But when you're in a venue, you're in front of the speakers, you're surrounded by a bunch of other mics, and then feedback is just a thing, and so you can't process them the same way. Um, yeah, so definitely the fighting the feedback in the smaller venues is harder. Um, there's been I can't think of the names of them right off the top of my head, but there's been a couple stages. There's one in Michigan, and like outside of Detroit, and it's the stage is a diamond shape,
Hmm.
and so the drums are in the back, and then the speakers like shoot off like kind of diagonally from the stage, and so like getting that balance so that everybody in the venue can kind of hear the same thing, but also make it sound like a real record, or like a real band. um and then you're also competing with, if they have real amps on stage for guitars and bass, you're competing with the sound of those plus the sound of the PA. Cymbals get picked up everywhere, and so the smaller venues, sometimes I'll just turn the cymbals off in the PA entirely because they're just in the room already, versus a bigger venue where you have to use those mics to pick them up.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Sounds like a struggle for real.
it is, but that's also what keeps me on my toes, right? It keeps me learning, it keeps me trying different things, it keeps me like, up on this stuff, and not, it's forcing me to not get complacent, um, which is, you know, at this point still fun for me. So we'll see how long that lasts, but for now it is.
Find the challenges fun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in this industry, you all but have to.
You want me to take the next one, Jess? Is that this pause?
Yes.
Is that why we're pausing? Have there been any projects where you had to think outside the box to solve a challenging sound issue at all?
Um,
Aside from that diamond you just described.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean that
yeah,
that is
yeah,
kind of a problem solving
yeah, yeah,
one. He
yeah.
kind of just answered it almost.
Yeah, I will say there's two other artists that I've actually done this with, and both of them were challenging for different reasons, but ultimately for the same reason. We had a lead vocal who had a wireless microphone and wanted to run that through a distortion pedal, and then keep that separate from like the normal singing sound, but also have the distorted vocal come in for different impacts of different pieces of a song. And it sounded really cool. But when you add all of that extra distortion and stuff like that, you also add the potential for feedback and the potential for like all of that kind of stuff too. So not only did we have to solve the problem of, okay, how do we take this wireless microphone and route it the appropriate way to get it into that plugin, and then give the singer the ability to turn it on and off when he wanted to, we also had to figure out how to make that sound the best at front of house, without feeding back and without completely cutting everything out of that sound to like still, you know, make it sound organic, and real. That was probably the hardest challenge from like that point of view that I had to deal with. But it was, again, it was fun, and once we kind of like got the vibe and kind of figured out like how to best go about it, it worked out really well, and it was a lot of fun.
Nice. So, what have been some of your favorite places to travel to and do front of house work at?
Well, the first answer for that one is actually pretty easy. I was with this band, Girlfriends, and this band Mod Sun, and we played we played this event called the Concert for Earth, and it was a 2-day festival on an island off the coast of Portugal, and the whole thing was put on by like a super rich guy, and he wanted to use it as like a nonprofit type of like fundraising event to help with like a lot of environmental issues and things like that. And so it was a super cool event, but again, it's basically like Portugal's equivalent to the Hawaiian Islands. It's a volcanic string of islands, about 2 hour flight off the coast of Portugal. And we literally set up in a volcanic crater. We came to the top of this, you know, volcano. There's a giant lake there, and it's been dormant for a while. So it's like all like green and lush and stuff like that. But we set up and we set up a stage and like did this concert and there, and it was such an insane experience. You know, flying around the world to be in this like, you know, island off the middle of nowhere, and we worked with some. There was I can't remember the whole lineup, but like Pitbull played, and I think the Black Eyed Peas played, and um there was a virtual thing from Queen, um, and just it was just such a cool experience, you know, all around, and a just absolutely gorgeous venue. That was definitely the top of the list there for sure.
Yeah.
Not something that you know people get to do very often, and I was lucky enough that I got to mix for 2 different artists on that tour or on that festival. It was very very cool.
I mean, I guess it's a good
Um,
thing. I'm pretty sure volcanoes can't just erupt out of nowhere. Usually there's activity prior to that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I I did have the thought that like, what if all of these like super sub heavy artists start playing and it ends up triggering the volcano? That could be a bit of an adventure. But on the other side of this, I mean, if we all died because we started a volcanic eruption because of a concert, I mean, is there any other more legendary way to go out? So, you know, I'll take it. um, but yeah, I mean, I've also mixed at like Red Rocks and a couple of the other, you know, super iconic venues. We're doing the O2 in London when we're there in a couple weeks, and I haven't done that one yet. I did Red Rocks, and that was just such a crazy cool experience too.
Oh, do we lose him?
I think so. Nick, if you can hear us, you are frozen and we can't hear you.
Dang. Dang internets.
It's that hotel Wi-Fi. So
But
I'm curious because you're mentioning this volcano. How did they get power over there?
So power and literally everything else was flown in on giant freight planes. The few days before, we had these huge generators that they literally put on the back of a plane and set up back behind the stage. I mean, they literally had to fly every single piece of that show to these islands because I mean, you can literally drive around the island in like 28 minutes or something like that.
Hmm.
So they didn't have any of that stuff available. Um, so yeah, they freighted every single thing in, and it was, yeah, these just huge generators that were powered by gas, which again, for an environmental thing, not the most ideal, but it was kind of the only way to actually, you know, make it make it actually work, um, and produce the amount of power that we needed.
Right.
I would have loved to see that requisition request for like an airplane full of porta potties. I just
Right. And yeah, I mean, the concert itself brought 10,000 attendees onto the island. So that's not crew, band, anything else. That's just the attendees. So I mean, there was easily an extra 15,000 people on this island that was so not meant for that many people. So yeah, they definitely had to they had to get very creative about all of those things, and including that one for
But
sure.
to be environmentally friendly, wouldn't you just go take a shovel and dig a hole in the woods?
Yeah, you could probably do that. Those holes would fill up pretty quickly with 15,000 people, but
It's true. It'd have to be a really big hole.
yeah, that's right. Um,
so
Uh,
speaking of power, have you ever experienced a time when front of house lost power in the middle of a set?
um, I've been pretty lucky so far that that hasn't really happened. Uh, but it is definitely uh, a thing that can happen. Especially when when you go into real venues, it's not as much of an issue, right? Because usually they have the advance of like what we're bringing in, how much power we're going to draw, all of that kind of stuff. They already have a PA there. They know how much that usually pulls in power. Um, but when we do these festivals and outdoor events, we do have to be very careful. We say this is the exact lighting rig that we're bringing in, this is the exact audio package that we're bringing in, how much is that actually going to pull, and then how do we make sure that the generators and all of those things can handle more than that, so that we're not pushing the peak of what the generators can do. And if something happens, I did do a show one time, this big festival in Palm Springs, and it was inside, but they were going through a massive, massive heat wave, and it was about 120 or so, 115, I don't know, insanely hot outside. And the whole city was just blaring their AC units. And the venue we were in also had to just turn their air conditioning really high. And we ended up, they lost power in the entire city for like 2 days. And we got through, I think, one band's sound check before we lost power on the entire, like literally not even the entire building, the entire block was just gone, and it didn't come back on. And so we ended up having to fully cancel that show. Um, and that was a huge bummer. I've definitely had a few instances where things sort of that nature happened. Somebody came up and unplugged the wrong thing at the wrong time. Um, but we try our best to make sure that like that kind of stuff doesn't happen, because it kind of is a bit of a bummer to everybody really when it does happen. But luckily, I've been pretty lucky with that one. We haven't really had too many big issues with it. So
yeah, it's like, don't touch my drum set. Don't touch my soundboard.
mm-hmm. Don't plug your phone into a random outlet somewhere in the venue just because you think it's free. That one
It's
hasn't
true.
happened to me personally, but I do have some friends who they were so close to like the exact amount of power that they needed, and somebody literally just attendee plugged in their phone to a random outlet, and it just blew that whole circuit and took pieces down that shouldn't have. I mean,
It's funny though. It's like, man, you would think people would know not to touch stuff like that, but they just don't know. It's
yep.
either that or they're just too drunk to know.
Yeah, or they just don't care. Like they don't think about it, and they don't care. And it does happen, but I've gotten into the habit now of hiding all of my outlet, like all of my power strips and things like that, or taping over open ones to make sure that we don't have anybody come up and be like, oh look, that's free. I'll just plug it in right here. It won't hurt anything. So
Funny to think people can think that way.
yeah, I'm I still get surprised by some of the things that people think and do or don't think.
Right. I mean, I come across that all the time. It's like people at my job, I work at a thrift store, and people are always asking, like, oh, can you change this price? No.
Yeah. Who do you
Like,
who do you
no.
think I am? No, I'm good.
I mean, I can change that price, but it's already been priced for a reason, and I'm not going to just change it for you so you can get a lower price. That's just
Right.
silly.
Right. And then potentially risk your job because they want, $2 off of their t-shirt.
Yep. It's ridiculous that people think they can just ask certain things, or,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, steal electricity from your soundboard.
Right. Right.
So, what have been some of your favorite cities to visit? And when you do visit, do you tend to get touristy and visit the places you go?
Hmm. Um, I think I hate that so many of my answers come with like qualifiers, because it all depends. We did a show in Brussels and it was an outdoor festival, and like it was amazing. Like the people were amazing, the catering is amazing, the show was amazing. But I mean, we literally landed in the airport, drove straight to the show, loaded in, did the show, and as soon as we were done, immediately got in a van and left. And
Hmm.
so I spent all of 4 hours or whatever in Brussels. And so have I been there? Well, yeah, technically, but I didn't have time to do anything else. Um, but when we were in Berlin, I had 3 days off there in between two shows, and so I did take time and like did a bunch of the touristy things, and got to see a lot of stuff that I would have wanted to, and some that I didn't, because of what it was. And so it all kind of depends. I try to take time, during all of these shows that I do. I try to take a little bit of time and like actually go outside, and like find a small, seemingly family owned restaurant, or like try to see something touristy or whatever, um, when I can. But sometimes it's not possible, especially on like arena tours and things like that. Your bus pulls in under the arena and you never leave that arena until you're pulling out to go to the next one. So it's hard. I definitely try to, though. I think in my younger years, I tried to like run out and do every little possible thing that I could. And now I'm like, okay, I'm going to take it a little bit more relaxed. And because then it's like, will I ever be back to this city? I got to take advantage of everything. Um, but sometimes that's not always possible. And also at this point, I will be back to a lot of those cities. So when I was in Brazil in March of this year, I was in Brazil with Rejects, and I think we were there for 2 weeks, and we had 6 shows, something like that. So we had some time to go out and explore, and that was so cool. We went to like one of the world's largest waterfall like systems. We got a private tour of the Christ the Redeemer statue, and that was again like amazing to not only get to see that stuff, but to do it with some really cool and amazing people.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, no TLDR. I try to, but it doesn't always happen that way.
I can see that though, because I mean, yeah, you went to a festival. Let's say you're only just there for the day. When it's different when you're on tour, because then you have a day or two off in between some shows as you're traveling, and
Right.
you can see more things. So
Yeah.
I could
I've
see
done.
that.
Yeah, or cities like Washington D.C. I have a uh, thing that I like to do sometimes, is because usually the bus call after Washington D.C. shows is really late. So we'll get done at midnight or something, and bus call won't be till 4 or 5 in the morning. And so I'll go and walk around like the National Mall and see a lot of those monuments and things like that. And again, a different perspective, because there's not very many people there. It's 2 in the morning, so who's is going to be there except crazy people like me? And that's been a really fun experience to try to do some of those types of things as well. It really kind of all depends.
You can go next, Chris.
Okay. Well, this is like the first time we've had a back and forth prompt each other.
It's all
We're
good.
we're
It's all
we're
good.
so professional. So do you have any battle scars from being on the road?
Um, I mean, yeah, who doesn't? But most of them are, little scars on my hands and shins. I've definitely hit my shins off of a bunch of drum risers and stuff like that, and ripped those apart. But like, I don't have nothing major, nothing too crazy. I have a lot of friends who have a lot more than me, that's for sure. But yeah, I've been pretty lucky with that one as well. Um, I have a pretty nice. You can't see it with my hairline, but I have a pretty good scar right here on the corner of my head. For a while, I had a perfect circle in the middle of my forehead from running into a pipe that somebody put down too fast and too low. Literally just right in this, and it just bled straight down my face. That was a lot of fun, but yeah, for the most part, they've all healed pretty well, and it's just like normal, little scars and stuff like that. It's not too bad. I can't complain.
Head wounds do bleed a lot.
They sure do. Yeah, look a lot worse than they are.
When I was a kid, well, I was 1 years old. I fell down the stairs in my walker, and they had to cut my head open. So I have a scar that goes from ear to ear. They had to put like 60 staples in it.
Oh wow.
I don't remember it because I was one, but
Yeah, That's
So I have a
crazy.
big scar, but you can't
Yeah.
really tell. You can kind of see it on top of my skull. But that's
Yeah,
my
no.
biggest wound.
Nothing like that yet. But, I don't want to think this way, but, do this industry, you work in this industry long enough, things happen sometimes, so
You never know. You never
that's right.
know.
So if somebody was looking to get into what you do for a living, what advice would you have for them?
It's not glamorous, but the biggest advice is to just do it. Um, the internet is a crazy, amazing tool. I've learned so many things from YouTube videos and things like that. Um, really, I think it comes down to trying to figure out what you want to do in this industry because there's a lot of different aspects, right? You can actually be an engineer and mix those shows. You can be a guitar tech and fix that stuff. You can be a system tech and set up the PA every day. You can be tour manager or management type of things where you're very behind the scenes, which are very important to planning and all of those types of things. You can do wardrobe, you can do whatever. So the first thing would be trying to kind of merch. Merch is a huge one. So trying to figure out like kind of where you think you would like to fall, on a tour. And then, the biggest one next is just find a local venue where you can start to learn and do those things. Find local production companies where you can get in there and actually get your hands on gear if you want to be more gear focused, and actually do it. Move up in those venues and those companies and figure out like, okay, well, I really like doing this position. Now I'm going to hone those skills. Use the internet to like learn things on your own. Come in and implement it, and kind of grow. And then when you're ready or you think you're ready or whatever, um, find some bands who are kind of on the same level as you to be like, hey, I've been doing this thing. I work at this venue. I would really like to get out and do it. Is this something you'd be looking for? And just, kind of start that conversation as well. Because, it's really not all about who you know, but there is a lot of, networking and things like that that really do help. So just kind of meeting every person that you can, being a super friendly person and being, really eager to learn just every little thing that you possibly can and really, get into it. It used to be that a lot of the touring people, roadies, techs, engineers, and all that stuff were very secretive, didn't want friends, didn't want to give their, secrets away, didn't want to teach, different generations. And I really think that that's all but gone now. Most of my friends, most of the people that do this full time love talking about this stuff, love teaching, love like helping people kind of find what they're good at and what they love doing and how to get there. And so even, social media, reach out to any of us and just be like, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. Uh, where can I go? Do you have any advice? Do you know anybody who's looking for this? And just kind of, start from there and hone, what you want to do and kind of, grow into different pieces of that as well. Cause you might start something and realize that you hate it. But you think you'll like that thing more. I know some people who started in engineering and absolutely hated it, but realized that they love tour managing and they love being the one to like plan all that stuff and make sure things go smoothly. And so sometimes, you just find a thing, realize that it doesn't work or you don't really like it as much and you try something else. And, you know, life's long. You have plenty of time to kind of, change your approaches and what you, think you might like and, grow into different roles if you want to try something else.
Right. Now, this has nothing to do with the question we just asked,
Sure.
but I thought about it as I was thinking here. I'm like, you've been on a lot of tours with people. Have you guys pulled pranks on each other during tour? Because we love tour stories. And I know I just saw something on social media the other day with you kind of pranking Tyson.
Oh, yeah. So Tyson is a very unique individual, and he is a super just goofy person in general, and he loves that stuff, and so I mean, granted, I'm a good person to do that with because he spends a lot of time with me on stage and whatever, and I get the job done, but also I'm also love to act like an idiot sometimes, so he and I feed off each other very well in that way. There's definitely tour pranks for sure. I think the favorite one that's been done to me. I was on a tour a couple years ago, and the drummer of the band on the second to last show bought some like 40 rolls of aluminum foil, and I can send you the video or the picture later if you want to throw it up or whatever. But he covered every piece of my bunk in aluminum foil while I was gone, like my blanket, my mattress, my pillow, my shoes. I have this little like felt box that I keep all of my like personal things in. Every single thing inside that box was wrapped. Then the box was wrapped. I mean, all of it was just completely covered. And I didn't know until I came back to go to sleep and I opened up the curtain and just everything was just aluminum foil. Um, yeah, that was probably the best one that's been played on me because it's it's silly and harmless, but he pulled it off really well. So
All you
gotta give
wanted to
him
do
credit.
was just go to bed.
That's right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you can't just come into a tour and like start, playing pranks and whatever. But once you kind of get the feeling of the people, and there's certain people on tours that won't put up with it. So you have to find the right people. Um, I used to also on rejects. I used to put a pitch shifter on different people's vocals, and I would turn it on and off at random times. And so Tyson would be talking into the audience. Everything sounded fine, but to the rest of the band, it sounded like he was a chipmunk. Um, because why not?
And then everyone else starts laughing on stage, and then the audience
Yep.
is probably like, why are they all laughing?
Exactly. Yeah. That's why monitors is fun because, I guess that's another thing that I should clarify. On bigger shows, there's actually two different engineers mixing the show. The one that was weird. The the one engineer mixes what the audience hears, and then the second engineer mixes what just the band hears. So any changes that I make on stage won't affect, that you won't be able to hear out front, but any changes he makes out front, you won't be able to hear on stage.
Huh?
And so, you can kind of do those things simultaneously and people will never know, most of the time. And so it keeps us, keeps us young, keeps us having fun.
It's true. It's true. So I must know, how much Diet Coke do you drink a day?
Too much. Arguably too much. As you may or may not have seen, we have one right here on deck.
Yes, I did see.
Yeah, I try to not go above 2 cans a day. But sometimes it just, you get a little carried away. I don't really have any vices left. I don't drink. I've been sober almost 2 years. I don't eat meat. I'm the most boring touring person out there. But my final vice is Diet Coke, and I can't bring myself to give that one up. So
I don't think 2 cans a day is that much though.
no, it's not too bad. I probably could, you know what, if I didn't put like some parameters on myself, I could probably finish off a case a day easily. But I try to
Yeah, a case a day would be a
better.
lot of Diet Coke.
Yeah. It's not a problem yet, but I guess it
Yeah.
could be.
It's kind of funny because I don't drink any diet soda. I only drink regular soda because I don't do artificial sweeteners. So
Sure.
as he's swigging back in his
As I take it back,
Diet
yeah.
Coke.
Yeah, I used to be the same. I wouldn't drink, or yeah, I wouldn't drink any diet ones because of the artificial sugars. But I got some like blood work back a couple years ago that was, basically saying I was pre-diabetic already, and I just really needed to cut back on the sugar. And so I stopped drinking all. I wasn't drinking a ton, but sodas and things like that are just so full of sugar, and it's just it's an easy way to really overload. And so I switched to diet sodas, and yeah, I don't know
Gotta do
why,
what you
but
gotta do.
yeah. And now I can't even go back and drink a regular Coke because it just doesn't taste good anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't taste the same. So for
Definitely
better or worse,
doesn't.
here we are.
And finally, the most important question, what is your favorite dinosaur?
Oh, my favorite dinosaur. You stumped me on that one. I wasn't prepared.
Some people are and some people aren't prepared for this question.
I'll probably say a velociraptor. Speed. They're wiry. As much as we can know, they seem very inquisitive and stuff like that. Yeah, so I'll go with velociraptor for sure.
Yeah. I'm surprised you didn't pick one that's an herbivore though.
Okay, fair. Yeah, that's fair. I guess I'm not very on brand on that one.
That's okay. You can be a velociraptor. Maybe it's a vegetarian velociraptor.
We'll go with that. Yeah.
I mean, there's no proof that velociraptor wasn't like an omnivore. How do they know for sure that they were only meat eaters? They might have eaten vegetables or foliage as well.
Those teeth are definitely built for plants.
Yes, totally. Well, that was our last question. Thanks so much for coming on.
Of
It's been fun learning.
course.
I
Of
didn't know
course.
a lot
Yeah,
about front of
I really
house.
appreciate you having me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I mean,
great.
I've learned a lot.